Alright, welcome back to the Revit lecture part 2. Last week we learned about how to get around in Revit and how to navigate around, got a little familiar with some of the controls and the menu items. Now this week we're going to actually prepare the Revit model for an export into Navisworks. Now Navisworks will be our main estimating tool, way to get quantities out of the model. So I'm going to, got a larger Revit file. You can see it's 220 megabytes, very large, maybe more of the typical that I would see working on a large commercial job. And so I'm just going to go ahead and just double click on the Revit file, and we're going to see what happens here. Obviously it's going to take longer because it's a larger file, but also when we get models from the architect, typically they're in what's called a central file, which is what designers use to do work sharing. And so when you have multiple people working on a project on the same file, they use this central file and work sharing on a network to be able to all be productive together. We don't need that, we as the contractor. We just have an isolated Revit file that we just want to pull quantities from. So it's saying that there's an error because it can't find the central model because we're not on that network. So we'll just hit close, that's okay. And it'll continue through to open up. And so what you can also do instead, if you don't want to have, I'm just going to close the local file. If you don't want to have that error come up, you can open Revit just by itself. And this is the preferred way to do it. It's good practice. And once Revit opens, in the welcome screen, you click on Open and browse to your file, and there's this button here at the bottom, work sharing. I want to detach from central. I just hit OK, and I want to detach and discard work sets. I'm not worried about the work sets at this point, just because I'm trying to just get quantities from the model. And so what this does is just makes it go a little quicker because it doesn't have that step of, hey, error, I can't find these files on this work sharing platform. It just gets rid of them because you don't need them. So just a little tip for opening up the model. Let this thing open up. So it says there's a few references it can't find. We're going to say that's fine. We'll ignore and continue to open up. So in this case, it opened up a view with nothing on it. And so you can see in the project browser some of the different views that the architect has set up. But we knew from last week that if you want to get to the 3D view, you click on this little house. That's the default 3D view. And that will open up this view. And so here we see our science building, and then it looks like there's two other little sites off the main site that have construction. But some of the things that we want to check while we're here with this model now and get it ready for exporting is what elements are showing. Sometimes there'll be things that we don't want for estimating purposes. And so you can go to the visibility graphics by either clicking VV on your keyboard as a shortcut, or you come to View and then Visibility Graphics. And that's where you can turn on and off things that are visible in the model in these different categories. So model categories, this is where you could turn off all of the walls if you wanted, and all of the doors, any of the actual model elements. And I found that it's good to turn off lines. A lot of times I'll turn off any of the site elements because I'll want to export those by themselves. So parking would fall under that category. We'll also have, there's a site category and topography. And we can hit OK and see if that changes much. You might see in this case we still see a lot of these site elements. And if we zoom in and take another look here, now let's click on this floor, for instance, which would be site work. So they're calling this just a floor. So the architect modeled this by using just a normal architectural floor, even though it's site concrete paving. So that's why when I turned off the site element, it didn't turn off those items. Here is another one where they modeled it as a normal floor and called it vegetated. So if we wanted to export the site separately, we'd have to get a little more crafty with how we do that. But let's go back to visibility graphics. Look at the annotation categories. Here you can see these are all annotation things. So the two main things I always look for in this category is scope boxes and section boxes. Sometimes you'll have a model that has, you can see just a small part of the building, and it's they've maybe used a scope box to section down and see just a portion. And so if you want to see the whole model, you would uncheck these and make sure you can see them that way. We'll also, in the analytical model, we want to just turn off all the analytical model. We don't need to see any of that for estimating purposes. And then we come to imported categories. I'm going to turn this on, and I'm going to turn them all on, and then hit OK just to show you what maybe some of these imported categories can be. As you see in this case, there's a CAD drawing that they've pulled in as a background that they've drawn over. And so for us, for getting quantities from the model, we don't need to see this CAD file. Maybe you will want to see it just for reference, but so if we go back to visibility graph, and you can click on it and see it's an import symbol, the A031 site plan. So if we go back to view, visibility graphics, and imported categories, you can see there's that drawing. And so we can turn that off. And I'm actually going to turn off all of these items. And I am going to leave on, however, the imports and families, because this is something that can usually contain important model info. Then I'm going to look at filters. We're not going to worry about that, and Revit links. So usually you're going to have your mechanical, electrical, and plumbing. In this case, fire sprinkler models were all done separately and linked in. We're going to, especially since we don't have them, I'm just going to uncheck those. So it's not looking for a link if it's not there. And so that gives me my model here the way I like it. One other thing you can do as well is hiding specific elements that maybe you don't want as part of your export. And so to do that, you can select the items that you don't want exported. In this case, I'm going to drag the selection box around this whole set. And you come here to the little glasses. This is the temporary hide or isolate, and we're going to hide elements. And so that's just going to hide that in this view so that it's not going to export into Navisworks for us. If you ever want to bring anything back, you click on this glasses icon and say reset temporary hide or isolate, and that'll bring it all back. So once you have your view the way that you like it, it's good practice to save your view. So you notice over here in our project browser, again, if you don't have that, you can always go into the View tab and the User Interface, turn on Project Browser. But we have all these different views that the architect has set up. And as we're scrolling through, the view that you're currently in is usually in bold. But if for some reason you can't find your view, what you can do is, oh, there we go. When I clicked on this window, it shows up. So this 3D view, which is the default, comes bold. So that's the one I'm in. I want to duplicate this view and name it something. So you can either come under the View tab and then click Duplicate View, or you can right-click right here on the bolded tab, and same thing, Duplicate View and Duplicate. And then it drops this down, and then we can just right-click on it and say Rename. We're going to call this Arc Export. So now it's at the top of my 3D view category views here. So if I was jumping to some other view, like let's look at a working view that the architect set up, and you know, now I want to go back to my export view real quick. Now, one way to do it is to go through visibility graphics and to change all those settings, or we just click architecture export and it's there. So now that we have this, now we want to export it to Navisworks. And so once we have our view the way we like it, we click on the Revit button, and then we click Export, and then NWC. And the first time that we do an export, we're going to want to change some of these Navisworks settings. So you click on there, and you scroll down towards the bottom, and by default, these two boxes will be checked. Now, for best practices in quantification, we want to uncheck the divide file into levels. We want it to be all one. We don't want it to be all divided up. And then also export room geometry, we're going to turn that off in this case. So then we hit OK, and we'll name our file to building, name it whatever we want in this case as a NWC, and then hit save, and then it starts doing its magic. And this is going to be quite a large model, so it's going to take a little bit of time to do this export.